Welcome to Bridging Education and Work, How Credential Transparency Serves Learners and Employers. I'm Carrie Wandler. I'm the Senior Director of Policy Initiatives for the Midwestern Higher Education Compact, and we're pleased to welcome Credential Engine with us today. Some of you may be familiar with some of our other credential transparency work we did with Credential Engine a few years ago. While this work predates my time with MEC, our organization still recognizes the importance of credential transparency, and as higher education and workforce needs evolve, transparency alignment continues to be critical. So we also have the opportunity to feature work being done in Ohio to implement a statewide community college credential transparency framework. So please help me welcome Shri Vidya Uppalapati from the Ohio Department of Education and Crystal Jones from the Ohio Association of Community Colleges. We'll get started first with our colleagues from Credential Engine. Jeff Grann is the Credential Solutions Lead, and his colleague, Sarah Wyatt, is the Partnerships Manager. And just to remind you that if you do have questions as the presentation goes forward, please do put those in the Q&A box so that we can keep track of them, and then our presenters can attend to them as needed. So thank you so much. And Sarah, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Carrie. Okay, so we're going to start off kind of with an example here, and maybe the screen is familiar to you. Maybe it's something you've already used this morning already. But ChatGPT and AI has become a part of a lot of people's lives. It's become a big part of the world. And when someone is thinking about going to earn a credential, or they want to skill up, or maybe try a new occupation, this is a place they might find themselves staring at, is this screen exactly. Um, so I'm going to give you an example, and this is a real life example, by the way. We did not edit or Photoshop this. I don't have those type of skills. Um, these are just screenshots from what actually happened as we went through this ChatGPT. So we asked it a question. I want to shift into a cybersecurity career, and essentially asked, how do I do that? What are the steps? Can you give me all of the steps as I want to move forward and advance and skill up higher and higher? And this is the output that ChatGPT gave. It said, look at the Credential Engine registry, which is very exciting to us. Um, and it gave examples on maybe where that person could go to school, what skills they might want to learn, or what certificates they might want to pick up. Um, and, like I said, there's no contract. We're not asking ChatGPT to do this, but it's tapping into the credential registry because, one, it's a huge data source of credential information. But also it's open source, so anyone can go to it and find out more. And this is just one more output of that is what it gave. So a CTID, that is an ID that's like on your driver's license, that long number. It's unique to every credential, so that's how it can be identifiable. And these are the steps that it gave that prospective student. Here's a course that you could take in cybersecurity. Here are a group of courses you can take, which will lead to a certificate, and then an associate's degree and a bachelor's degree. So when that person sat down, they were presented with a challenge, and the challenge was there's a lot to know, an overwhelming amount of information to know when you're looking to earn a new credential. There are over 1 million of them in the United States alone. And with those credentials, you don't just want to know the credential. You want to know what skills you're going to be learning. Is it in your area where you live? What does it cost? Is there financial assistance available? How long will it take? There are many questions. And so as we're adding data into the registry, we hope to answer all of those questions by one search because it will all be linked together. So here's kind of an example of linking data together. We often compare it to like Expedia or Travelocity. So if I type in that I want to look for a flight to New York City, I'm from Tulsa, the Tulsa area, so it'll tell me Tulsa to New York City flights, and I will have a bunch of information because that's what I want to look for. But it might also tell me cool restaurants I might want to visit, nearby hotels, if I need a rental car. So we're getting all of that extra information linked in from other data sources. And that's essentially what the Credential Engine registry is doing with credentials. So I think this is an important, the first word is the most important. Together we're building this. So as this data is added, this is not Credential Engine's data. It's your data and your data and your data. And so by adding all this information, we're bringing it into one common data language and one common data platform or source, but all linked together, speaking the same language. So I gave some examples of why a learner, prospective learner might want to know about credential information. But there are a lot of people that need this information, a lot of different entities. So credential providers, um, are credential providers, is this credential offering competencies that will meet the job skills that we're preparing our learners for? That is really critical information. And from the employer side of things, we can track that same information backwards. If I want to hire for this certain job and it requires these skills, where are the credentials being offered that will prepare people for this job? So, as we're publishing those programs and credentials, there's also value in publishing these jobs and occupations. Um, First, I think we know that, credentials take time, money, motivation, and lots of other things. So it's really helping answering the why of why this credential would be beneficial for someone to earn. I can take a look into my future and I can see what occupation group this will prepare me for, what skills I can earn, what specific job. um, Many states have talked about publishing public sector jobs, so I can take a through path if I earn this credential and get this public sector job. We can highlight in demand occupations. I think Ohio will probably tell you about that in a little bit, and making sure that our ecosystem, our learning and working ecosystem, is keeping up with the supply and demand of critical occupations in your area. And so overall, what the registry is doing, things are transparent, but we're really bridging that gap between learning and working. These are often very siloed entities, but critically reliant on each other. So how can you learn so you can get a job earn and earn more? Um, so those were very high level general examples. But at this point, I'm going to turn it over to our friends in Ohio to give you very specific examples on data that they are adding to the registry and how they plan to use it.
Perfect. Thank you. Um, Good morning again, everyone. Thank you to MEC for having us and to Credential Engine for allowing us to highlight our partnership with them. Sarah, if you want to go ahead and go to the next slide. Perfect. So Ohio has been involved in Credential Engine since 2019, and our vision for what we're doing here is very similar to the last couple slides that Sarah just showed you. Realizing that idea of a pathway with multiple access points and continuous learning opportunities, particularly in a workforce environment in which upskilling and reskilling are constantly at front of mind for business and industry partners and for educational partners. We would like to continue to empower our workforce by making credential opportunities available to them, both from an access and affordability standpoint, but also from an awareness standpoint. And that's really where Credential Engine comes in to support us and why we are investing in trying to become more engaged with Credential Engine. What we would like to see is an integrated platform, and Credential Engine provides an incredibly user-friendly interface on which we can do that. And this integrated platform, as Sarah mentioned earlier, pulls data from multiple sources. So we've got data coming from our jobs and family services. We're looking at crosses with labor market information, competency outcomes, and then, of course, the credential information itself, the details of what are these certificates, what are these degrees, who are the institutions, and where are they, how much would it cost? And the hope is that students of any age, workers of any age, all the people who support them, guidance counselors, advisors, career coaches, parents, potentially even managers and bosses who are helping their workers become more upskilled or reskill, can all be partners in utilizing Credential Engine, and that our credential finder becomes a resource for them. So moving to the next slide to give you a picture of what our post-secondary ecosystem looks like. We have a total of 88 public institutions, and then we also have 52 independent colleges and universities. And in addition to that, we have 49 Ohio technical centers, and our technical centers play a really interesting role in between career technical education, providing post-secondary education, and often serving as a wonderful bridge between high school or those who've already entered the workforce and entering higher education at a community college or university. Our Ohio Technical Centers also provide workforce-ready skills and certificates that can help people directly enter the workforce or improve their workforce experience. We're very proud that we have a good coverage too across the state in both rural and suburban areas. So we're excited to have the Credential Engine Finder represent that. Like I said, we started in 2019, and I will be honest, it has been a stop and start journey. Where we are at right now, the opportunity with Credential Engine has provided us sort of a nitro boost, but up until now, we've definitely been a little stop and start. So we had a voluntary participation period from 2019 to 2020, where we had a group of pilot testing institutions, one of which was Clark State, which Crystal was at that time, and helped lead that pilot. And then in 2022 and 2023, sort of with a gap for COVID and COVID recovery, ODHE started working to do some bulk uploads on behalf of all of our public institutions. And we started with our internal higher education information system, where institutions were already inputting credential data, persistence data, completion data, student data. Our hope was that this would reduce the barrier to entry for our institutions and take what we learned from our first pilot test institutions and do this on a large scale to really help everyone come in, and from that point onwards, just work on minor enrichments and updates. We encountered some difficulties with the bulk upload process. One part of it was very easy, thanks to help from Credential Engine. The actual upload itself was not that difficult. What we encountered were internal data inconsistencies, differences between ways in which institutions had been marking various programs as active or inactive in our own data system. And we realized that HEI, for our internal data purposes, only collects a certain amount of data. But when you put that into Credential Engine, and if you took a look at some of the pictures that Sarah showed earlier, and we have a couple screenshots coming ahead, that will show you the range of information that you can tag and have connected to a credential. And HEI left a lot of those gaps empty. And so we decided that we would take some time to put the onus back on our institutions and say, we as a state believe that this is important, and we want to help you get engaged in picking up this work and enriching this data, knowing that the bulk upload that we did sets a very, very minimal baseline. So from 2022 all the way through the end of last year, we did a series of webinars. The Credential Engine team was incredible. They had regular office hours. They provided guidance documents. presentations, walkthroughs, and helped a handful of our institutions who took on that challenge to do some optional data enrichment. And that data enrichment takes on a variety of forms, kind of including all the different the CTDL that was mentioned at the beginning, sort of descriptor language, and values and tags that they could add to it. But like I said, we really needed a nitro boost. A lot of what you see on this screen right here tells you voluntary, it tells you ODHE is doing things, it tells you optional. And so we got the opportunity through Credential Engine to apply for a Gates grant. And that takes us to kind of what we've been doing in the last year. In March, we were lucky enough to receive that Gates grant, and we partnered with the Ohio Association of Community Colleges to do this intentional investment from the community colleges with the help of OACC's network and their ability to leverage those partnerships with our institutions to require participation from all 22 of our community colleges that would provide them stipends, recognizing that data enrichment is not free and it is time consuming, with the goal that we were not just going to look at a bare minimum, but that we were going to meet quality of best practice as Credential Engine has defined it. And so that includes these components that you see listed down here in that darker blue shade. So everything from describing credit to non-credit, providing more specific web pages, describing program duration and cost, financial assistant, and then going into some of the more creative and amorphous aspects of getting a credential, right? It's not just a degree or a certificate. It is also student support services, competencies and learning objectives. And so we started digging more into that. So if we take a look at the next slide, you can get a sense of where all of these components come in. So the college offers a credential, and a credential is tied to many of these values. These values then also, if you attain that credential, produce outputs. So in collaboration with our Ohio Department of Jobs and Family Services, who hosts all of our labor market data, we've been working to include information associated with each credential, presuming that you attain it based on average employment, median salaries, annual openings in our state, and employment change rate. Again, depending on the student or the learner who approaches Credential Engine, we're not just talking about 18-year-olds who are thinking about college. We're talking about a whole variety of students, and I'm sure all of you are talking about this in your areas, but more and more the picture of a non-traditional student is the majority of our students that are in post-secondary education. So they are becoming really our traditional student. And so many of them are thinking about employment from the start. The goal of attaining this credential is so that they can get a job that will provide them financial security, that will get them into a career path that will lead them on a pathway to economic mobility. And so we want to have those economic factors there. So that partnership has been really important to us. And again, we're mentioning state partners, but I cannot emphasize enough how helpful Credential Engine has been in this process. They have walked us through every aspect of this. They've met with our different state agencies and partners and provided institution level support as well as strategy level guidance. So the next slide really takes you down. We're talking about all these values. What does that look like? This is a screenshot of what the credential finder could look like. And there's a link right there that Jeff very helpfully just dropped in the chat. You can click in to actually view what a credential finder could look like if you haven't seen one, or if you haven't seen one in a while, to explore. This is a cybersecurity associate's degree that's available at one of our Southeastern region community colleges, Zane State, who's done a fantastic job in the Credential Engine efforts this round. We've been very appreciative of the effort that they've put in. As you can see, it gives you all the basics, right? All the things you assume you'll get to know about a credential. How much does it cost? How long will it take? And what kinds of jobs could I get with this? And then it starts going down even further into occupational connections. What kind of occupations could this prepare you for? Not just the name of those jobs. Connects you to financial aid opportunities and cost details. And then even further, this is something that we're very excited about, competency metrics and associated KSAs. And we've aligned these by connecting the credentials to the most commonly held occupations, and then taking those occupations and looking at those KSAs using Department of Labor information. And huge props again to Sarah and Cadence for working on that, as well as another member of our team at ODHE, Aaron Hobbs, who's been very helpful in that. The sort of teaser at the bottom here is a little coming soon related outcome metrics. We are still mapping out realistically and ideally what we would like to offer in terms of additional outcome metrics. What is realistic for our institutions to be able to provide? What's realistic for our state agencies to be able to find and support them in doing that? And ideally, we would like to have sort of the full gamut of everything from enrollment, persistence, completion, and pass rates in addition to these competencies and learning metrics. So we have a handful of institutions who will be helping us to pilot some of this and test out what that could look like. We have one of our community colleges, Lorraine Community College in the Northeast, that is going to be taking a look at helping us picturize with Credential Engine what it could look like to represent the many stackable pathways that we have in the state. We have invested a lot, as have many of our peers in the Midwest, in stackable pathways. But as always, they're less utilized than we want them to be. So how can we use Credential Engine to show those pathways and really visualize them for someone that enters at this point and wants to find their way? And again, emphasizing lifelong learning and career mobility. We want people to say, oh, I might already have this associate's degree, but look, I'm only so many credits away, or I'm only X dollars away from being able to get a bachelor's right in my region of the state. And I could get support for that. And then connecting them again to other state resources and programming that we run that could potentially help them afford that. So that's a little bit of a deep dive into what the registry looks like for us. I'll pass it over to Crystal to share a little bit more about the Ohio Association of Community Colleges and their role in helping us move this work forward.
Thank you, Sir Vidya, and good afternoon, morning, depending on where you're at. But yeah, as mentioned before, we are grateful to the Credential Engine team, the Bill Gates Foundation, and Ohio Department of Higher Ed for all their support in this work. So as we approached this, when we found out that we received this award, we launched this program in May. And the reason why we have this first bullet up here between May and August to designate for the colleges to enrich the data is because we wanted to try to align this timeline with things that were already going on at the college. So ideally, most of our campuses are finalizing their catalogs around this time, making updates to their websites, different things like that. So we thought that this would be an ideal alignment to ask them to look into this during that time. And to further support them, we also had monthly engagements just to answer questions and actually also give them timelines of where they should be during this process. And big shout out again to Credential Engine for office hours. They allowed our institutions, all 22, sometimes multiple times, to schedule time with them to sit down and ask questions specifically to guide them through this process. So May through August, we really wanted the colleges to focus on enriching their data. So simultaneously, we also met with our Marketing and Communication Professionals Council, which is made up of professionals from each of the colleges in these areas to kind of create a plan to have a statewide marketing and regional marketing plan so we could prepare for this once the data had been enriched. So we also want to be very intentional. You'll see the timeline not only aligns with the traditional semester, but those B terms or different terms throughout the semester so that we allowed students multiple options for onboarding, into these programs. So we've been engaging them throughout this process. And then our plan in January is to actually implement or launch this statewide regional marketing campaign and also award stipends to those colleges that have enriched their data. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, I think up to this point, together, collaboration, this is taking all of us. And this is kind of giving you an update on some of that enrichment, especially some of those specific data points that have been mentioned before. But you'll see we're working with different state agencies, of course, the Ohio Department of Higher Education, Ohio Department of Jobs and Family Services, and some of their specific teams. And we're still trying to figure out, as Sir Vidya had mentioned, about some of that related data, the best way to actually approach it. And it may be different by institution. But as you see this list here, it is all the things that all of our stakeholders, that list that Sarah has shared, want to know. So we're really excited about having all of this in one place. So one of the things I'll point out here is the support services. That has actually been kind of complex, believe it or not, because we're serving different institutions, small, medium, and large. Some of these areas are, pretty self-explanatory. Others are a little complex, but we're hoping to include all of this information, and we've got a lot of it, so that students can know where and how they can be supported throughout this process, and not only, the other information. So really excited about this, but stay tuned. And the next slide will show you a screenshot of the Credential Engine project page. So there was a page throughout this process as well to support our colleges during this process of, links to maybe the webinars that we did, the monthly engagements. There was a whole guidance page that literally led them through each part of the bulk uploads, everything that we are doing. So there are multiple ways that Credential Engine has supported us during this process, and we're truly grateful. And we're almost at the end of it, and super excited to almost launch the marketing portion of this plan. So I think with that, I'll turn it back over to Sir Vidya.
Absolutely. So like Crystal said, we're kind of at a turn. We're starting to move from data enrichment and get ready for marketing, especially for those of our institutions that are at the front of this work. So first, obviously, for us, we'll be completing the SCATES grant successfully with OACCs and OACC and the community colleges. But then, like I mentioned at the very beginning, we have a wide array of institutions in our state, and the community colleges are an important pillar of our post-secondary ecosystem, and they are not alone. So scaling this up and moving to our public universities and partnering similarly with the association for them, IUC, partnering with our Ohio Technical Centers who have thus far not been involved in Credential Engine at all. So beginning with them and sort of representing the wide array of short-term credentialing and workforce credentials that our Ohio Technical Centers have. And then on a slightly different note, we don't manage our eligible training provider list. That list and their offerings are managed out of the Ohio Department of Jobs and Family Services. But it is definitely an area of interest, and I'm sure some of you can relate to this because that website is old and outdated and clunky and not user-friendly. All of those words are the opposite of what Credential Engine is. We have cutting edge UX and UI on the Credential Engine platforms. We've got AI integration. They're piloting new tools to help scrape data from different databases. And of course, we have this national scale. We have peers that we can learn from. Indiana, Kansas, Michigan, in the Midwest, Texas, and Pennsylvania are also states that we've looked at and watched and followed and are hoping to sort of really continue to move ourselves into the ranks of those institutions who are leaders in Credential Engine. So we would like to take this opportunity and take the lessons that we've learned to continue to scale up and to continue to stay competitive, of course, with our other peer states, but also to be useful to our institutions and to all the different types of users that would be interested or could be interested in pursuing credentials and finding opportunities to upskill, reskill, and continue their education in a variety of forms by providing them everything that they need in this front-facing manner. So thank you all so much. The next slide has the contact information for the higher ed team that has been working on this, as well as Crystal, who is our point of contact and our leader from OACC. If you have any questions about how we've been doing this work, specifically in Ohio, and what we've learned and continue to learn every day as we do this. Jeff, I'll pass it over to you.
Great, thank you. So up until now, we've been talking about what's possible when credential data become transparent, connected, actionable. And now I want to shift the focus to you, your context, your organization, your role. Many of you represent states and systems already navigating major data modernization efforts, and credential transparency aligns directly with workforce development initiatives, transfer reform, statewide pathways, and things that are probably already on your agendas. So the good news is you don't have to start from scratch, and the building blocks exist and they're designed to meet you where you're at. As you can see on this slide, the work's already underway, 35 states, 2 regional consortia. That means you're stepping into something that's tested. It's already in operation. And so you're not early, you're right on time. We have a partnership team ready to help and regularly host a state partners meeting that functions as a community of practice, connecting credential transparency work across the country. Next slide. One of the most powerful levers to support the work is policy alignment. So whether you're setting policy, advising policymakers, or simply operating within a policy environment, you can play a role in making sure that the information learners and employers need is publicly available, structured, open, linked, and interoperable. Transparent credential data supports institutional effectiveness, outcomes reporting, clarity in communicating learning outcomes. These are areas that institutional accreditors are also focused on. So the language on the slide is intentionally simple, and that's the beauty of it. It gives states and agencies and institutions a clear framework to signal that we value transparency, we value interoperability, we want systems to talk to each other. So even if you're not drafting policy, you can help move conversations forward in this way by raising awareness, aligning practices, and encouraging leaders to adopt transparent language. Next slide. Another practical and accessible entry point here is the CTDL Voluntary Assessment Tool, or CTDL VAT, which helps organizations evaluate whether products, services, platforms, or vendors they're considering using are ready to support CTDL and linked open data. This helps CIOs, IT teams, procurement groups ensure that their new systems won't create new data silos. It's especially relevant for environments like yours, where procurement happens at scale across multiple institutions. And there's a natural connection point here with the MEC technology master contracts. So if your organization's already using MEC software and licensing contracts, the CTDL VAT can act as a companion guide during your vendor review. It helps you ask, does this product support data structures we need for transparency? Will it interoperate with linked open data? Can we build education to workforce connections on top? So it doesn't require a new procurement process. It's just incorporating the CTDL VAT language and questions into processes you already use. Next slide. Another way to get involved is by leveraging our Open initiative, which transforms publicly available data, such as IPEDS, National Workforce Board information, into structured linked open data. These tools support employer-driven skill alignment and can plug directly into ETPL processes, career navigation platforms, and sector strategies. It's helpful for organizations that want to start with something manageable. You can use open data to enrich what you already have. You can jumpstart your registry presence even before your internal systems are fully updated. And it helps identify gaps between what's known publicly and what learners can actually see. So it's a good on-ramp for institutions, state agencies, workforce partners who want to begin contributing right away. Next slide. There's also CTDL Extra. This is an AI-powered tool that converts publicly available credential information into structured CTDL data. The tool dramatically reduces the lift for organizations, especially those without technology teams on their speed dial. With Extra, you can drop in a public URL of a program or course. It automatically extracts, transforms, and validates the content from that page, and you'll receive a CSV file ready for upload to the credential registry. This means that your frontline staff, program leads, workforce partners, IT teams all have a practical way to participate without doing any code. Next slide. So what ties all this together is the ability to see transparent, structured data to help people connect their learning to meaningful work opportunities. And this slide shows how skill profiles, when extracted from existing course catalogs and college transcripts, enable matching to jobs using AI. This opens new possibilities. Learners can see how their skills apply across industries and roles. Institutions can show the value of their programs in terms employers understand. And employers can find talent based on skills, not just degrees. This is where the ecosystem becomes more than data. It's an engine for mobility and opportunity. Okay, so as we close, I want to take some time just to highlight a few concrete takeaways. First, the work you've seen already is going on in 35 states, region, and multiple regional consortia. I want to highlight all the connections you saw from Ohio earlier. Their work spanning voluntary participation, statewide bulk uploads, using Gates-funded enrichment efforts across 22 colleges, collaborating with universities, technology centers, service providers. It demonstrates what coordinated system-level transparency can look like when multiple partners use shared standards and linked open data. Second, the tools I highlighted are practical entry points for different people depending on their roles. CTDL VAT be added directly into your procurement and RFP processes to make sure those source systems you're purchasing work well with credential transparency and promote credential transparency. The CTDL Extra provides a rapid way for institutions to publish program data without any technical capacity. Open and jumpstart statewide system level transparency efforts. And the policy language I showed is simple, but it's easy to adapt and aligns well with transfer reform, workforce initiatives, and accreditation expectations. So these transparency tools aren't pilots, they're operational, scalable, designed to support the kinds of organizations represented here. Statewide agencies, university systems, community colleges, IT data teams, workforce partners, accreditors, employers, vendors, whole community of folks needing credential transparency. So the key opportunity here is alignment, ensuring these systems, tools, data practices across institutions use shared interoperable structures. So as you return to your teams, consider the next step that fits into your context. How does this align with your priorities, capacity, or current projects? And it could be publishing data, improving systems, influencing policy, enhancing employer alignment, or just simply using some of the tools like CTDL Extra that I highlighted here. But I'd love to, as we move into discussion here, I'd love to hear more from where you sit. Where do you see this fitting in your organization and work? Thank you very much.
Well, that's terrific. Thank you so much to the presenters. Thank you, Jeff. If you do have questions, please, as a reminder, try to put them into that Q&A box there so that we can moderate them and, kind of get all the questions answered. I think probably I have just a very, I feel like we've been talking about this for a long time, and misconceptions still persist. And I'm just curious about the, in terms of the panelists, if what you feel the biggest misconceptions are, either from the institutional level or, even more broadly than that, about credential transparency and what it is, what it isn't, who it helps, how hard or not it is to implement. I'd just like to, do a little bit of myth busting around this if anyone's up for it, because I do think there's a fair amount of misconceptions still in the air about this work and kind of what it entails. So that's kind of an open question to the panel.
And Carrie, I'm happy to jump in on that if you don't mind. And as Sir Vidya had mentioned, in 2019, I was actually a practitioner at the campus level, and then having this perspective. And believe it or not, because during this process, we heavily engage like institutional research because it's data, maybe marketing. Sometimes academics doesn't really understand their space in it. So, so I think there's a myth between that they think, okay, this isn't for us, but it's for all of us, right? So we've had to have really intentional conversations around the role they play in this work and then how it could assist in, enrollment, with prospective students and recruitment and even retention sometime, right? It's called those pathways because maybe a student came and was really tunnel focused on completing a course or a certificate, but we hope that they've had those questions and asked questions to see the pathway, but how does that relate to maybe even other programs? So I'd like to say that, if you're an academic professional, this is for you too. It's not just for employers or prospective students, but this can help really drive enrollment into your coursework and for you to tell that whole story.
I can share. That's fantastic. Just raising awareness and connecting stakeholders. Good work for sure. I've been with Credential Engine quite a while, and I don't hear this as much as I used to when we first started, but folks sometimes think we can't participate in this because we can't share personally identifiable information. And what I want to just emphasize is that the work of credential transparency is focused on describing the credentials and their properties themselves, not necessarily who owns or holds which credential. So people don't put their information into this registry. It's like a metaphor of a catalog, of all the information you'd want to know about these offerings, but not as a PDF, but as the structured linked open data format that we've been using and is very useful for AI tools and other vendors to use in their products. So I don't hear that as much as I used to, but I do know. I just wanted to get that on the table right away. We don't deal with personally identifiable information. Um, there is not a FERPA step in your project with us.
Okay, well, I'll ask the question that I feel. So I've been traveling a little bit over the last few weeks, and everyone wants to talk about Workforce Pell and credentials. And I know we don't know, right? And that's a lot. But I'm just curious if there's any if anybody wants to weigh in about this work and how it potentially sets the foundation or sets institutions thinking about this as a real opportunity. If it sets the stage for that kind of work. You're free to beg off on that question. I have
I
personally
mean, I
quite
think
a bit
I agree
because
with
yeah,
you.
yeah,
I agree
we'll
that,
know a lot more in a little
yeah,
bit, but
we
yeah.
we don't know,
Mhm.
we don't know a lot, but and we're doing research as much as we can. I think we're thinking about what programs, based on what we have heard and what we hope we know, what programs are already aligned with this, what programs are close to being aligned with this. That is a huge area of research right now for us. I think like many other states, we are thinking very intentionally about like, if this does apply to us, we need to be ready. We cannot be caught flat-footed. So while we don't know a lot, we're trying to know as much as we can. And that does mean knowing a lot about the credential offerings that we have in the state. So many of our institutions are already involved in assessing their credentials, and I hope that for the data partners who were involved in doing this review for Credential Engine, they were already ahead of the curve of their own peers because they'd already been spending time in their data, in their credential offerings, looking at financial aid, looking at the length of credentials, looking at which credentials have recently been decremented and which credentials have recently been created. So they've been spending a lot of time in that, and they've been doing it not only for Credential Engine, but a number of other initiatives that OACC and our Ohio Manufacturers Association, the like Central Ohio Healthcare Collaborative. We've had a lot of workforce related industry. We've been calling them sector strategies. And so we've had industry sector strategies that have been moving for the last couple of years, and many of our institutions have been involved in that work. So I do think that Workforce Pell is coming at a time where maybe not everybody at an institution, but a good chunk of the leadership at each institution is already thinking about What is the value of our credentials? What is the cost of our credentials? Why are they designed the way that they're designed? What is their length? Which I think puts us in a good position, hopefully, for the workforce Pell conversation. I think similarly, Workforce Pell, I think, aligns with this larger thread of conversation across the nation around making education more accessible and making education more workforce connected, right? Unfortunately, most people cannot afford to simply learn for the sake of learning. So you are learning for the sake of a career that will continue to give you the opportunities that you want, the lifestyle that you want, and maintaining that career in bad job markets like this one, and being able to move from job to job. And so I do think that it's very aligned with other conversations that we're having. So my hope is that the work that we've been doing in Credential Engine, this work will dovetail with whatever outcomes come out of Workforce Pell. This could be part of the platform that we use for marketing for Workforce Pell. It could be, and I'm kind of saying this on behalf of Credential Engine, but they've been so helpful with tags and values. We already have financial assistance listed for many of our credentials, and we're working to get that updated for all of them. If a program is Workforce Pell eligible, making that into a tag, things like that, I think these are conversations that seem much more plausible because of the work that we put in to Credential Engine. I'll let Jeff or Sarah hop in from their perspective nationally and from a registry side.
I was just going to plus one your comments for sure. And you maybe to add on another dimension, you can kind of get a sense of the federal interest in credential registries through this recent FIPSI grant, which has a absolute priority around talent marketplaces and the development of credential registries. So there's $50 million in that category for this kind of work that folks are encouraged to apply for. It's got a tight turnaround, but I suspect that's not the end of the federal interest in transparency and using registries to inform the public. So.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that. Yes, that I had that in my mind as well. For institutions who are still having a hard time circling the wagons, right? Like getting at, because it does require expertise or knowledge from a lot of different facets of an institution. A lot of different stakeholder voices are best, it works best when all of those folks have a seat at the table. I'm curious if you have any guidance around what's the first best step in terms of those kinds of things and how to get everyone aligned and together, especially when there's that fear that we're also strapped that who's going to own this and what's it going to mean for my department or me or or what's the maintenance like and how are we really going to manage when we're underwater at certain times in the academic year. So it's also an open question about kind of, yeah, if we're knowing we need to do this, but it just never seems like we can get the right people in the room. How can we start, I think.
Yeah, from a state perspective, Ohio is in an interesting position where it's been about 10 years, maybe a little bit more now, but we moved from a Board of Regents structure to a department structure. We're now a cabinet agency, but that does also change the nature of our agency. We're no longer a controlling board. We are a coordinating agency. So from the perspective of trying to do new initiatives like this, that strips a lot of the power away, right? If we're not providing somebody money for a grant and there's not something in legislation and it's not a directive from the chancellor, it is very hard to require engagement. It is very hard to have metrics or accountability around initiatives, right? And strategies. So that was a big part of one of the struggles and part of why the very first iteration of participation that we did with Credential Engine was this optional pilot. I will also say that coming as far as we've come, where it is now really something that we want to invest in and we want to put that weight behind it. It's not necessarily budgetarily possible. The Gates grant, very helpful, but it is also, quite frankly, why we leveraged OACC and why we reached out to them and said, are you willing to be our partner in this? Because we needed, one, somebody who could move the stipends more quickly than the department could to the institutions. And two, we needed someone who had that direct connection to the institutions. And I'm going to pass it to Crystal because I would love for her to describe the way that they connect with many different types of leaders in each of the colleges and with large scale leadership and sort of pull all of those pieces together.
No, thank you, Sir Vidya. Perfectly set up. Because one of the things that we do and we pride ourselves with, we actually convene all of the officer groups. So everything from your chief academic officers, institutional research, chief student academic affairs, all of those academic affairs, student affairs, excuse me, marketing professionals, workforce, so forth, so on. So what we're able to do is have really intentional conversations. And I think the sustainability part, to your point, when it gets heavy, is what we had mentioned before in our presentation, is really aligning it with things they're already doing. So that way they're, if they're looking at the catalog, check out these links while you're doing that to make sure that they align with current certificates or offerings. Marketing can be the backup on that. If they have a website design, don't forget that you have to update these URLs in Credential Engine. So those are the kind of conversations we're having with these different groups, as we're also engaging the presidents in this work. To Sir Vidya's point, this is the state vision. These are the agencies that are supporting this work. This is the place we'll be nationally when you're having those conversations at AACC or with our, partners. So I think it's really, it's a strategic approach, but it's also very intentional and individually focused on that group to how they play a role in this integrated process. So it sounds nice when you say it like that, but it is a lift. But when you really take the time to explain to each one why it's important, like I mentioned with the demystifying the myth with academics, we have to do that with each group to really let them know and lift them up and give them accolades too on the work and the achievements that they've done of setting Ohio above everybody else and working with Credential. So.
And I will add on to that. When we typically start a project with a partner, it's amazing to dream of all the different types of data that's available to add into the registry, but then it's important to take a step and see, well, does the institution have this data collected anywhere? Is it easily accessible that they can upload to the registry? Or is this information written down on a post-it note and lives on somebody's desk? And that needs to be formatted and collected. And that is a challenge that we encounter. So like Crystal said, we try to align with maybe what is already happening in regards to reporting. So we know that there's a list of institutions for the state. Someone has that. We know that there's a list of programs because that is reported annually. Your IR department, it probably lives with them. We know that there's probably SIP codes, and that's easy to pull. But things that might be a little more difficult would be student support services. Those aren't always listed somewhere that's easy to pull. We might have to go talk and ask different departments. An Ohio example would be their work with Jobs and Family Services. We thought going into this, we will just include outcomes for Ohio's top jobs because that's a smaller subset. Let's start small. But when we went to JFS, they said, that's actually more difficult for us because when we send our annual data to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, we're just sending it all. So could we just send it all to you? So we got more than we had bargained for and was actually more amazing. So being able to align with this national reporting that's already happening, and we can transform it and we can work on making it into CTDL. But if we can just get the data in some type of way, that helps us move forward.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for that. And from my own experience, data is convincing to some folks. Other folks need to hear those student stories, right? And if you can get people excited around how life-changing credential transparency is for individuals, sometimes that really sticks as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. Very quickly, if I could just add, a couple years ago, Credential Engine had a student support use case task group. And I had the opportunity to participate in that. And it was so enlightening I was already bought in to Credential Engine, I was already working on it. I already felt like this was something we should invest in. And that use case task group, the process of going through every possible use case, the process of looking at real use cases that came to us through anecdotes and data from partners, and the process of, as a task group, coming up with who could possibly use this and how could they possibly use it, really emphasized that to me. And I think that it was a very worthwhile exercise for us internally, because I took that back and I said, okay, as Ohio, we have to decide. We can't keep doing this stop, start, stop, start. We have to decide, do we want to be involved in this national initiative or not? Do we just want to say, you know what? We love the idea. We can't take this on. We're going to do what we can at a state level. Or do we want to stay involved? And do we want to be a leader in this work? And that conversation, a big part of what helped that conversation internally and helped us decide, were the use cases. So I think for institutions and state agencies and state partners that are listening to this and thinking about, okay, where would we fall? Would we take this on? Would we not take this on? The use case is crucial to that. Thinking about what your use cases look like and what they could look like if you were to invest in this.
Wonderful. We're so glad you did. We're so glad you decided to stay engaged and lead this work and obviously share it with us this afternoon. So we're kind of getting up into into time. So I want to be respectful of everyone's time and on time here. But we appreciate our friends from Ohio. We appreciate our friends Sarah and Jeff from Credential Engine for bringing us this opportunity. Please do complete this survey. The survey will be available when you exit the webinar, and the link will also be placed in the chat. We've already posted the presentation to the website, to our MEC website, so we'll be able to post the recording of today's event later on as soon as it's available. We hope you'll keep informed with MEC by subscribing on our website. We have a monthly MEC newsletter and also topical areas for newsletters that you might be interested in. So once again, thank you so much for your time, your energy, and for doing the good work here and sharing it with us. And we'll see you next time. Take care.
Thank you all.